Beginning in 1803, a small expedition traveled over 8,000 miles during 2.5 years from St. Louis to the Pacific Ocean and back again. During the next hour, join us on an RV trip from St. Louis, Missouri to Astoria, Oregon, along the Lewis and Clark Trail. Along the way, we'll stop at over 30 Lewis and Clark sites that can be visited directly from your RV or from a nearby campground. President Jefferson's dream of exploring the northwest portion of the continent in search for an all-water route to the Pacific became a reality when Congress approved a secret appropriation for an exploration of the West. Jefferson had already chosen his secretary, Captain Meriwether Lewis, to lead the expedition. Jefferson also agreed with Lewis that a co-leader would be required. Lewis chose Lieutenant William Clark, who Lewis had served with earlier in his military career. While negotiating with the French for the purchase of the port of New Orleans, Napoleon suddenly offered to sell the entire Louisiana Territory to the United States for $15 million. Lewis and Clark assembled a party of mostly military enlistees. However, the permanent party would also consist of civilian translators, a Native American woman carrying her infant son, Clark's manservant, and Lewis's dog. Jefferson charged the Corps of Discovery to find an all-water route to the Pacific Ocean, take measurements necessary to create a map, collect specimens of unknown plants and animals, and explain to the Native American leaders they met along the way that a new government was in charge. A trip today following the route as closely as possible from St. Louis to Astoria will be over 2,900 miles long, one way. How long such a trip will take, of course, depends on your own travel habits. Many people break this trip up into several segments rather than attempting one hurried trip while visiting many of the other attractions along the route. We'll visit some additional attractions in our bonus feature, More Along the Trail. Your visit to St. Louis should certainly include the Gateway Arch and Missouri History Museum, two great campgrounds. The Casino Queen RV Park in East St. Louis and the St. Louis RV Park offer camping close in to the heart of this gateway to the trail. St. Louis is a city in rebirth, and people are moving back into the downtown area to be close to the action. The riverfront features the Cleves Landing, several blocks of restored buildings containing many dining and entertainment establishments along brick-paved streets. St. Louis Center features shopping and a food court, while historic Union Station has 3 levels of unique shops and eateries. Efficient, clean, and dependable, the Metrolink light rail transportation system connects all of this together with a stop right outside of the Casino Queen RV Park. Of course, the premier attraction here is the Arch, not only for a great view of the area, but also the great museum of westward expansion housed underneath. Westward expansion, made possible by Jefferson's bold purchase of the Louisiana Territory and his vision of an exploration of the West, resulting in opening trade and settlement of this new territory. The IMAX Theater, also located under the arch, features the movie Lewis and Clark: Great Journey West. Included as part of the Jefferson Memorial National Park service site, the fully restored federal courthouse is also open for tours. RV parking is very limited near the arch, so if you're not staying at a nearby campground, we suggest you park your RV in the Casino Queen truck and RV parking lot and either walk across the Eads Bridge on the pedestrian walkway or take the Metrolink to the Arch to Cleves landing station. After visiting the Arch and Union Station, take the Metrolink to Forest Park to see the Missouri History Museum. Forest Park is a legacy of the 1904 World's Fair, held in St. Louis to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase. Permanent exhibits here feature the World's Fair and a complete history of the city of St. Louis. The Lewis and Clark State Historic Site is located northeast of St. Louis off Route 3 in Hartford, Illinois. This new interpretive center is located near the site of Camp Dubois. Be aware that the center is open on weekends, but closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Upon reaching the mouth of the Missouri River north of St. Louis in December 1803, the expedition built a small fort to serve as winter quarters. Here, the raw recruits of the newly formed corps would experience many weeks of military training, drilling, and discipline under the direct supervision of Captain Clark. We'll visit several interpretive centers on this journey, and each one will have a special focus on the expedition. Here we'll gain a greater appreciation for the purpose of the mission. The cutaway keelboat provides an impressive display of the tons of supplies that would be needed for the trip and carried below deck. The Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, Sergeant Floyd Steamboat Museum, and Sergeant Floyd Monument are all located in Sioux City, Iowa, near where the only member to die on the journey is buried. Lewis and Clark carried many United States flags to distribute as gifts to the Indian leaders they would meet. However, before they would reach home, these flags would be outdated by the addition of 3 additional states to the Union. A garden surrounding the center features many plants collected and described to the world by Lewis and Clark as part of the scientific aspect of their mission. Murals are the special feature of this interpretive center, depicting such scenes as the start of the journey, the capture of deserter Private Moses Reed, hunting buffalo, and the burial of Sergeant Floyd.
How do you think the men are holding up?
As well as could be expected. Some of them are pretty young.
And death, a stern teacher, I know. Sergeant Floyd was well thought of, God bless the man. We need more like him. Do you think Gas can handle his command?
Yes, sir. Put it to a vote of the men.
Some of these roughnecks, especially a deserter like me, I don't know.
Interactive displays allow visitors to start their own journal based on what role they wish to play on the expedition. Entries are made at various stations throughout the center. At this display, you can learn what became of your favorite members of the expedition. The Sergeant Floyd Riverboat Museum is located in a retired Army Corps of Engineers vessel next to the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center. Here we'll meet Sergeant Floyd and see what he looked like. In the days before photographs, only famous people like Lewis and Clark had their portraits made. So how do we know what Floyd looked like? Prior to his final burial in 1901, a plaster cast was made of his skull. Using recently developed forensic science techniques, his facial features were recreated. The museum also contains many historical photographs and other information concerning the construction and dedication of the nearby Sergeant Floyd Monument. Additional displays depict life along the Missouri both before and after the Lewis and Clark expedition, and how riverboats brought trade and progress to towns along the river. And, since the museum is housed in a retired riverboat, you can also tour the restored engine room and pilot house of this unique diesel-powered vessel. The Sergeant Floyd Riverboat Museum and Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center share a parking lot with plenty of room for RVs. Located on the south side of Sioux City, Iowa, the Sergeant Floyd Monument is likely the most impressive gravesite marker dedicated to any single member of the Corps. Due to limited parking for large RVs, you may wish to leave your rig at the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center or a nearby campground and use your tow or towed vehicle to visit the monument. Sergeant Floyd died on August 20, 1804, and was buried with military honors on a bluff overlooking the Missouri River south of here near today's town of Sergeant Bluff, Iowa. During their return trip in 1806, the members of the Corps discovered his grave had been disturbed and exposed, so they buried him for a second time at the same spot. In 1857, the Missouri had eaten away most of the bluff, so the citizens of Sioux City moved his remains to a spot near this site, and he was buried for a third time. By 1901, his grave was again threatened by the relentless Missouri, and Sioux City erected this monument over his fourth and final resting place. While in Sioux City, we learned the Corps of Discovery 2 was encamped just south of the city, preparing to pass upriver the next day. This group of reenactors is retracing the complete voyage while traveling in replicas of the actual vessels used by the original expedition.
Well, we're going upstream to Sioux City tomorrow.
Okay.
And from there, I'm just new. I just got here yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I'll only be here for 2 weeks, so I'm brand new.
Not like if a bear charged you or something, you could just poke right into it.
If you shot, remember it takes 15 seconds or more to load. Most people take longer. If you shot the gun and you missed, and the bear's charging you, this is all you got left. So you can stick him. Or the same thing they did with men when they were in battle.
You're showing us how to get a bayonet on pack.
There. And it's in perfect condition, ready to fire, everything's perfect. It's what the British troops carried in the Revolutionary War, called a Brown Bess. Shocking muzzle size. It's 75 caliber, which is 3/4 of an inch.
I've been a member here of this new Discovery
Just
Expedition for 3 years. And I can't
very inaccurate.
look out my reenactment.
But if you got hit in the humerus in the upper arm, it would break every bone in your upper body.
Volunteers typically join the Corps for several weeks at a time. 71-year-old Gary Buckley of Piedmont, Missouri, was playing Private Joseph Field of Kentucky.
Guards, bring the prisoner forward.
While we visited the camp, Captain Clark presided over the court-martial of Private Reed, who had recently been captured after an attempt at desertion.
Mr. Reed. Sir. You've been brought before this court, charged with desertion, stealing a public rifle, pouch, and horn. How do you plead, sir?
Guilty, sir.
It's within my power and within the guidelines of military law to put you to death, sir. Are you aware of this? And that you should be forced to run the gauntlet, the pride of your peers in the Corps, no less than 4 times. And this mercy of this court, considering the situation and the conditions here on the frontier, to be different than at a military post. That certain leniencies should be considered. And I hope that no further incident in your behalf.
Have my word.
This court is adjourned.
Make sure you confine him securely in his quarters. Thank you, sir. Corps, fall out!
You can determine where you might catch up with the Corps of Discovery 2 by visiting the Lewis and Clark Heritage Foundation website at www.lewisandclark.org. Just outside of Mobridge, South Dakota, along State Route 1806, stands another monument to a member of the expedition. This monument was completed in 1929 using funds raised by area school children to honor Sakakawea, the Indian woman who would ultimately contribute so much to the success of the expedition. Most historians believe that she died about 18 miles north of this site at Fort Manuel in the year of 1812, 6 years after returning from the exploration of the West. Her death was recorded by a single journal entry in the fort's records. This evening, the wife of Charbonneau, a Snake Indian, died of a putrid fever. John Ludding, clerk, Missouri Fur Company. She was only 21 years old. Located just a few hundred yards from the Sakakawea monument, you'll find a sculpture of Sitting Bull adjacent to his gravesite. A group of South Dakotans moved his bones to this site from a military cemetery in North Dakota in 1953. Parking is available for RVs. However, larger rigs with tows may have trouble looping around without having to back up. The members of the expedition would spend their second winter away from home near present-day Washburn, North Dakota. Here in November of 1804, they would build a stockade-style fort and proudly name it after their new Indian friends, the Mandan. The men had hoped to make it much further up the Missouri before stopping for the winter, but the river began to close with ice in the last weeks of October. Sergeant Ordway noted that our huts were 4 rooms